Hello, my name is Cody Pullium and I am one of the undergrad TAs for Spring 2019 Teach 209 with Michelle Sleevar. And we're going to be going over binder organization and just my methods of how I put my binder together. And then you will also hear from Rachel Blake, who is also one of the other TAs this semester for your section of 209. So for me, here is my portfolio, my binder that I put together last semester. You'll see that I decorated it my own way. You can do it however you want. It does not have to be fancy. However, I did put a side label on the binder just so I can have it here in my home office on my bookshelf so I can use it as a resource later on. I will tell you this though, you will most likely use this as a resource during your practicum, your field base, and or your student teaching. I have already used it twice. So you will see on the front here, I do have a picture of my students. I had two of them. I'm sure Michelle went over this with you, but do not be alarmed. You will not have two students most likely. Not everyone does. So don't fret about that. Going along with the picture, by the way, if you do decide to put a picture on your binder to decorate it and make it more meaningful, that's great. However, please make sure that you check with the teacher of your classroom and ensure that one, that there is parental consent to use pictures, and two, that the teacher is okay with you using the pictures as well and taking the pictures. So moving right along, going into the binder, for side note, make sure your binder is at least 2 inches or larger because you are going to be putting a lot of stuff in here. Okay, so moving on to the binder, you'll see my first tab is, gotta look at it here, it's my teaching goals and plans paper, which is one of the first papers you'll do. All together in your binder, you're going to have your tutoring goals and plans for instruction part 1. You'll have your tutoring goals and plans for instruction part 2, your daily tutoring plans, and your reflections that go along with them. And then at the end of the semester, you will also put your teacher report in here. For me, which Rachel Blake will go into more details on tips and hints for your binder and your organization this semester. But however, for me, I started my binder immediately. Like I would go out this weekend and get your binder so you have it and you can start putting things into it. Doing that will only ease the pain and stress when it comes to having the binder put together at the end of the semester. So, like I said, my first one is my part 1 of the tutoring goals and plans for instruction paper. I have my paper in here with the edits that Michelle went through that she marked, which graciously helped me a lot in the long run when it came to part 2. I'm sorry if you just heard my dog bark, and continuing to do so. And then going on to your next tab after your part 1 and part 2 in here, I have my observed lesson in the front. So you'll see my pre-reflection, which is done, of course, before your observation takes place. And then in that same tab, I have my lesson plan for my observed lesson. And then my post-reflection, which you'll do after your observation. So then you go into the next tab, which is my very first lesson. So I have my lesson plan in here. Also, to go along with your lesson plans, make sure you have copies of artifacts. So make sure you put in there things that you did with your students or that you created. Not only one, so it makes sense with the lesson plan and you can see proof of what you've done, but you can also use this as a resource. Such as this one. I actually use this as a resource like day 2 of my practicum. Moving along, I go into my next lesson plan and that continues. So then I go into, I think it's like your second or third lesson, you're going to do your assessments with your students. So make sure that you have those in there. I have my raw notes and data that I collected. And continue on through the lesson plans. Another side note that helped me, which of course you don't have to do, I'm sure Rachel's going to go over something completely different that she did, but when organizing your tabs, I put my tabs as lesson 10-2, which in reality is the date. It happened on 10-2 of 18. However, I left putting the year on there so it looked more like a lesson, so when I use this binder as a resource, I can say, oh, I'm going to go into lesson 10-2 and try that, and then hopefully next week I can try 10-3 or 10-4 or 12-5. It's just an easy way for me to use it as a resource and to pull lessons from it. So going on, you are also going to have your running record in here, and whatever day that took place. For me, it took place on 10-2. So then I have my running records and all my raw data, which you will learn how to do, so don't fret about it yet. And then I continue on to my normal lessons, and that continues on for quite a while. Again, please make sure that you are putting your artifacts in here. And I know it seems silly, but for me, I see a paper plate cat that we created, but it makes sense to me because it goes along with the lesson that I did. And so now if I ever use this as a resource, I can see, oh, we did that. That was such a great idea. It turned out really nice. I'll do it again. So just make sure you save your stuff so you can take a look at it. Plus, Michelle loves taking a look at your stuff when she's going through your binder to see what all you've done throughout the semester. Moving along, you can put copies, of course. I have an original copy of a graphic organizer I did with a student. That student did not want to keep their folder at the end of the semester. Of course, I left it up to my students to take their folders. And so if they were going to take their folders, just take photocopies of everything so you can place your artifacts in here. CamScan is your best friend. You can take a photo right there on the spot if you want to give back your student whatever they worked on or their feedback. So take a picture with CamScan and then it uploads as a PDF and it looks like it was done by a photocopier, which is awesome. Again, that was CamScan that you can download for iOS or for Android. Moving along, you go into the lesson plans, continue, and then you get towards the end. Let me get here. There it is. Towards the end was my observed lesson. And of course, you don't have to do this. Michelle even told me I didn't have to, but if it helps you, because it certainly helped me, on the day that your observed lesson takes place, I just put a simple note over the lesson plan saying that it was my lesson observation. And that just helped me, so when it came to the end of the semester and I was scrambling through to make sure my binder was completely organized and put together, I knew that I wasn't missing something. But of course, if you're on top of things and you don't need that kind of reminder, don't put it, don't waste the paper. But that's just worked for me. So of course, I finally get to the end here. You'll put your last assessments at the end with your last lesson that you did or whenever that took place. And use that information, of course, to make your teacher report, which takes me to my very last tab, which is the teacher report. You'll put 2 copies in there. Again, don't fret about the teacher report, especially if you haven't even learned about it. That time will come. Just know that you need to make sure you have 2 copies in there. And then, of course, I had another tab, which you don't have to have. I don't have anything in it now because it either came out or I put it in somewhere different in my binder. But it's just nice to have that other tab so you can either have blank paper in there, so if you need it during your tutoring sessions, or other notes that you take down, or even if you have blank sub-plan copies, just so you can jot things down if you know you're going to be missing a day, so then you can type up that sub-plan. And that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. make sure you're emailing whoever you have as your TA for the semester. So of course, if you find out that you have me, which you'll be receiving an email from me soon, make sure that you are asking all the questions you have. There is no question that is a stupid question. You are all probably lost right now and worrying, but don't. The semester will be awesome. Your 2Ts will be awesome, and you will have an amazing semester, especially with Michelle. So that's it from me. So I'm going to turn it over to Rachel Blake. Thanks for watching, guys. Good luck.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel Blake and I am a special education major. I am one of Michelle's UTAs for the Teach 209 course in the spring semester of 2019. I wanted to spend some time today talking to you about tips and tricks that I have in regards to formal lesson planning and the rest of your course. And the first one would be making sure that you're staying organized and on top of your plans and reflections. And one way you can do this is to start your portfolio now. You can add in your lesson plans and lesson plan reflections along with artifacts that of student work, and you can put that directly into your 3-ring binder so that at the end of the semester all of your lesson plans are already there because you put them in right after you implemented them, and it will make your life so much easier and you won't have to scramble to find which student work went with which lesson plan so that it's organized for Michelle to see what you did throughout the semester. Another thing that I wanted to mention was the importance of time management in this course and the importance of not procrastinating. So this course it was one of my first courses that I was working directly with a student in a instructional setting. So because you're working with a real student, you really need to be on top of things because you're ultimately in charge of their learning. And with that in mind, you need to make sure that you're delegating the appropriate amount of time so that you can ensure that they are learning at the fastest possible rate. With that being said, make sure that you aren't procrastinating on your paper because that's going to drive all of your instruction throughout the semester, and it's going to help you so much when you go to implement actual lesson plans. With that being said, I wanted to kind of talk about how your organization and time management can be of benefit when you go to plan your actual lesson plans. And I wanted to talk about different tricks that you can use during implementation to ensure that students are learning to the best of their ability. And the one would be to establish a routine with your students. So if you go into your lesson and your student knows that he's going to tell you one fun thing he did over the weekend, and then you're going to share one fun thing you did over the weekend, and then you're going to start with your reading instruction, and then you're going to move to writing instruction halfway through, and you're going to end with a reflection of what happened during that lesson. If the student automatically knows that that's how it's going to work every single day, then they can begin to anticipate what they'll be doing next, and there will be less transition times needed, and it's going to make your lessons that much more efficient, if that makes sense. So I know some of my classmates benefited from writing out like a short little schedule of the routine on their whiteboard so their students could check off which steps that they have done, and so that they can read which steps that they'll be completing next. So going off of that, I kind of wanted to talk more about using your time efficiently in the lesson, because you only get, I think it's like 40 minutes to actually teach your student in each lesson. And I know sometimes it can be hard to do both reading and writing instruction, but what I discovered throughout the course of my lesson planning is that you can use a book to teach a writing strategy. So what I mean by that is, for example, my student needed help with sequencing in her writing, and so I used the book If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, and we read that book, and I had her do some predictions because she was also working on that. And then later on in the writing strategies, we used a sequencing graphic organizer to kind of use the storyline of If You Give a Mouse a Cookie to help her understand what sequencing is in writing. So you can use a book that has a good example of what you're trying to teach your student to save time in your writing instruction. If you have more questions about that, I can help you, or Michelle will be able to help you with that. I also, going off of the sequencing graphic organizer that I mentioned, a lot of younger students, especially in the elementary levels, benefit from the use of graphic organizers, and I use so many different types of graphic organizers, and I highly recommend looking into all the different types of graphic organizers that are available to organize anything from reading comprehension ideas to developing ideas for a student's own writing. And the last tip that I would have is to make instruction as fun as possible. And my student really enjoyed when she wrote a story that we then put into a book, and she made her own chapter book, and she really loved that. So find what your students really like in their interests, and use those interests to help you think of an idea to implement into the instruction, because it's ultimately going to increase their motivation and willingness to learn. And we want all of our students to learn.